A young worker looks like me, looks like you, looks like everyone else in this room. Essentially, it's people who are going to bring energy and change to current existing ideas, to bring a new perspective, and to find different resolutions.
Yeah, like young workers, I think out of all of the demographics I can think of, look very diverse nowadays. Like a whole range of colors, genders, orientations, more diverse than at any point in the past, I would say, in Canada especially.
Like in our generation, our young worker is a lot more diverse than like you're looking at the 1960s, where the young worker would be like a young like white male, because like women were like not included in the workforce a lot in past generations as they are now, as well as more diverse background of people. So.
When I was hired on, it was like, okay, I have 2 children and I would love to work. I'm educated, I'm bilingual, I can do this job, I've done it before, but I only work 4 times a week. It's not open for discussion, but yet we have, the upper level government saying we want to get women back into the workforce, we want to retain, talent, but I'm here, but no one's willing to work with me. It's like this is the business need. It's like, well, I'm not asking to leave early. I'm just saying I want to work 1 day less for my mental health, for my well-being, for and then you avoid things like absenteeism where people just leaving the workforce altogether.
I'd go with competition. Lots of jobs that are out there require lots of experience, and there's not many entry-level positions out there, but it's kind of catch-22. How do you get the experience without at least getting an entry-level job, right? So it's difficult to start out.
But I think there's still a little bit, because of precarious work, there's still people who are like, I'm not going to say anything, or I don't necessarily know what my rights are, but you know what? If, like, for instance, in my workplace, I had an allegation of an onset that I needed to go visit at this client, and there was an allegation that at some point someone had pointed a weapon at someone else. And I was expected to go in on site and make sure that there was a harassment policy in place. Well, first of all, I think that's ridiculous, but I don't feel comfortable going in if there's a possibility of a weapon on site. I don't wear a Kevlar vest. I'm not trained as an RCMP officer. I have the right to refuse that. Now, I've been with the government for 10 years, so I have no problem saying, I'm not doing that. You need to find an alternate method. Whether that I have an escort come in or whatever workaround you want to come up with. But if you're a brand new person coming in, whether you're a young worker or just new to the government in general, you might, A, not know you can speak up and say no, or B, feel like you can say no because you want to keep your term job, you want to feel like you're a really good employee, so you get hired elsewhere. So I think there's a bit of both of that.
Yeah.
I just think it's about knowing your rights too. Because we at our local, most of our young workers are in the kitchen, and they're not allowed to come. They're not allowed to come to the meetings. They're allowed to come to the meetings, but really they don't end up coming to the meetings, and they just don't know what's going on, and they need to be informed. And as the young worker, I hold the young worker portfolio at our local, and I'd like to create some kind of a welcome package that can kind of introduce them to the union that says, like, these are the websites, and these are the acronyms for everything that's out there, and just something like that.
I think that for us who these issues are important to us, we're here for a reason. And I think just by opening up a discussion, having discussions with our colleagues, with other young workers, it's important because we can discuss the issues. Maybe there's parts we're missing, maybe there's things that we should further discuss or further think about.
What does a young worker look like to you?
But that's a very good answer, isn't it? Like,
I don't think there is a link other than
I think
that
it,
they're underserved.
yeah, like young workers, I think out of all of the demographics I can think of, look very diverse nowadays. Like a whole range of colors, genders, orientations, more diverse than at any point in the past, I would say, in Canada especially.
any other thoughts?
You can get a sponge, willing to learn, don't know very much in terms of like the big what they're joined into, especially for the government. That it's a big organization, but willing to learn a lot when they're able to.
Right.
Right. So
When given the opportunity.
yes, exactly.
Which is part of what we're talking about here, right? Is like making space for young workers within the union. You're talking about the employer?
Yeah, more so on the employer side. When you join in, you don't know like what your pension's about or like how benefits work and what you have available to you outside of like your 9 to 5 or whatever. So
But we have a role as a union in kind of driving the employer's perspective on this too, don't we?
yeah,
There's a certain amount of leverage.
to have orientations done and stuff like that is important.
Any other thoughts on that real quick?
Like they don't know a lot about the government or the employer as an organization, but they have a lot of knowledge that the employer doesn't have about other areas like social media or how to even use computers sometimes. We have coworkers that don't know how to turn, that need us to come over and turn the computer back on.
I think one of the things I've also noticed is that from I think Dan was mentioning that they have a lot of ideas. They have a lot to say, but sometimes when you're in an organization that has existed traditionally with doing things a certain way, it's hard to get improvements and change with the ideas that young workers can bring in, right? Because there's ways, even in my job, whereby this can be done so much easier if only you would just listen to what, you know what I mean?
Right. So the next question, that's a great segue because it's what are some of the challenges that young workers face. I know you're talking about a challenge and these sort of like institutional barriers to even affect change. But like, so what are some other challenges that young workers face, in your opinion?
Just jumping into the processes and figuring out how meetings go and when you motion things and when you adjourn things and just the whole the processes of creating order, because we have all these ideas but they have to be put into the set policies and regulations that are already in place, and that takes learning.
Right.
It takes someone explaining it, whether it's through education or having to figure out yourself or just being thrown into it and you're wanting to do something and, well, I want to change the agenda. Well, we already motioned to adopt the agenda and just things like that. So it's kind of a learning curve.
It's a process, isn't
Yeah.
it? And we exist as a union in this framework of process.
Yeah.
It's industrial democracy. Like you can change. If you don't like your boss, there's not a whole lot you can do about that. But if you don't like something in your union, you can change it if you know
How?
the process, right? So as a union, we have UDP, the Union Development Program. We have a lot of different things that kind of start that ball rolling. But also, it doesn't have to be so formal, does it? You can have mentorship, right? Like if you have an outgoing president that's been there and you're local for 15, 20 years and they're on their way out and they're kind of looking to do some succession planning, you maybe hitch your wagon to that, right? And you kind of pick their brain. But that's something, yeah, it's a challenge to get to know the process, but it's not an insurmountable challenge, is it? I mean, these are things that we can do, right? So,
I think that we're doing them. I think right now we're doing them reactively rather than proactively. Right? Like when we know elections are coming, okay, then I'm going to try to teach you something, right?
Right.
We need to start being a little bit more proactive instead of reactive that way.
And I think as young workers, one of the major challenges that we face, if you're asking about the union, is walking into a structure, an organization that has already been built and probably more built and has more structure and parts and moving and everything together, that it probably has never been that organized before. And stepping into that structure, there's a lot more barrier to change, I think, than in the past. If there isn't, you know, how Marianne said yesterday that you have to make your place, when there's already that much structure around you, it becomes a lot harder to take your place, so to speak. Where I think in the past, let's say in the 80s, where there wasn't that voice to begin with, then you could go ahead and push whatever you believed in a lot easier than now.
Yeah, no, for sure. I agree. You have anything to add, brother? No.
I think one last barrier I wanted to mention is just like the intimidation from the employer. And when you're young and you don't know the rules and you haven't read your collective agreement, it's very easy to be not involved in the union.
Sure.
Because they don't want you to participate in the union, at least our employer.
It's fear of reprisal.
Yeah.
Right? Like they hold a lot of power over you
Yeah.
when you're starting out and in a precarious employment situation, say you're a term,
Yeah.
right? A lot of people start out as terms. Like, yeah, you're going to be less likely to get involved as a result of that. But I can tell you that, and I can think of my experience in certain workplaces where, you know, we'd have people that were of retirement age and they were very involved in the union because they would say, what are they going to do, fire me? Right? Like, I don't care. Like, you know, I'm still gonna, and I always really loved that those people were around because they didn't have a whole lot to lose at that point. But young people starting out in a term position, like, yeah, you have a lot to lose, right? But certainly, I can tell you, if they do take reprisal against you, the union will help you with that because
Yeah,
that's not necessarily
that's why I'm here
within
right now.
that legal framework, is it? Right? That's kind of not allowed. So the next part is.
You know what, can I say something?
Oh, certainly.
That is
sorry.
a barrier though, right? Because yeah, what are they gonna do, fire me?
Yeah.
Well, what if they do fire you? Our agreements and arbitration process is so long that by that point you're fed up. Ah, screw it. I'll just walk.
Yeah, it's pretty hard for the employer to arbitrarily fire people, and I think it's a lot of it's.
I'll tell you, I'm not a federal employee,
Okay, yeah.
and we've had a ton of people walked out the door in the last since I started.
Yeah.
So in the last 4 years, we've had quite a few walked out, and they settle at the last minute. But by that point, the member has given up because it's a 2-year fight, and they're just like, just give me the settlement. So the employer, that gives the employer power to just literally walk you out the door.
They have the leverage in that situation too. So, however, I can tell you, imagine if there was no union at all, right, in that situation. I'm not saying that 2 years is an acceptable time frame necessarily in that person's situation, but with no union at all, there'd be really no time frame. It's like, I don't like the look of your face today, see you later. So
Or settled.
we need, but what I'm hearing though is we need to do a better job of like shortening those time frames to find recourse when there's decisions
Well, because
that are made.
the
that are
member,
not-
it's not even really about the time. It's the lack or not the lack of, but the decrease in motivation from the member
Right.
during that time period, right?
Understandably so. I think if I were in that situation, yeah, for sure.
So then they go and they carry on, and they're just like, well, I'll just take the settlement. You know, they didn't want, if you would have asked them 2 years before, they wouldn't have wanted to take a settlement, they would have wanted to fight for their job.
Right.
But because that's our barrier, but they lose that.
So we have a couple minutes left. We have this chalkboard, and this is where we're going to capture some more of the themes that we're talking about right now. I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions. And what I want you to do is to just write like 1 or 2 word answers, maybe 3 word answers. It's okay. I'm not looking for a paragraph. But we're going to hand this out. And like I said, I'm going to ask you rapid fire questions, and then when I ask for your answers, I want you to hold up the chalkboards, and I want you to have them face the camera so we can see them.
So I have to make my writing legible.
Relatively.
Yes.
Okay, these are my flag colors. Red, blue, yellow, and green.
Yeah, they're exactly. The first group was like they were trying to take them apart. They thought they were like 5 different. So, the first question I'm going to ask you is, what do you need as a young worker? What do you need?
Sorry.
All right, let's see what we got. You need training and guidance. You need support, mentorship, being listened to. Those are pretty much synonymous, aren't they? Like, I mean, that's the same kind of thought. Opportunity obviously ties into this. Job security, which in this day and age, the precariousness of how people are employed is
6 years of terms till I got to indeterminate at stats, and there's people who've been there for double the amount, if not more, and they are still signing terms, 3 month, 6 month year terms. And that's a big one for me, so we don't have to keep hopping around, and it's just ridiculous.
And just the overarching thing that I think all people want everywhere, I don't know, can you guys see this? Is respect, right? I mean, obviously we want to be respected. And that ties into all of this, right? If someone respects you enough, they'll offer you guidance and training. If they respect you enough, they'll support you and mentor you. They'll give you opportunity. And if they respect you enough, hopefully they would try to give you some degree of job security, right? But no, certainly good answers. So what I want you to do is 2 at a time.